A very good evening, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well. I hope I am audible. Can anyone from the chat can confirm that I am audible? All right, looks good. Okay, let me give my quick introduction to you guys. My name is Sagar. I am a technical architect at Just Compile. I am also a technical trainer. In these all years of my career experience, I did some projects in so many different technologies that includes Angular, React, Node.js, .NET, and various others. After this development, I also started technical training where I conducted some technical training on the same technologies. And now I think it is the best time where I can share my knowledge with you guys. Okay, so as you guys all know, and you guys are here. This session is going to be about Angular directive, right? So let's not waste our time and let's just quickly get into it. So what I did is I created one Angular project. By the way, this session is going to be for those people who have already did at least some work in Angular, if not at least some work in web. Okay, so let me just know in the chat if you guys are already from web background or Angular background, uh, by any chance are, or are you a complete beginner for this Angular? Okay, if you are not from Angular background, that's not a big deal. Okay, you will still learn at least something from the session, that I guarantee. Okay, to learn what exactly directives are, let me just share one picture with you guys. Okay, let's not jump into the technical discussion first. Let's just understand what exactly Angular directives are. Okay, and for that matter, what I did is I downloaded one picture from internet. Let me share that picture with you guys. I hope you're able to see this picture. Not this one, this one. Okay, just in the chat, tell me what exactly you see, guys, here. This is something very common that we see regularly in India, especially that the road is being constructed, and now it's time to dig the road and fix the pipeline. How many of you guys have seen something like this in your lifetime? Just let me know in the chat. Yeah, we are very familiar with something like this, right? Yeah. Now when I see I'm also a developer, and I really like to connect all our lifestyle things to the development, because the way we behave in our day to day life, if we can do implement the same practices you know in our coding, that is going to be a very optimal kind of a code. Okay, you don't need to learn any kind of best practices actually, okay, to code in the best possible manner. If you just follow what you do in your day-to-day life, it is actually nice. So this is definitely a bad idea, right? To construct the road and then dig the road to add the pipeline there. If I'm not making a mistake, right? Just let me know in the chat if you guys also agree with me on that. Now, what if I tell you that this is exactly what a directive is? Okay. Now you'll be laughing at me. Okay. Like, hey Sagar, aren't we supposed to do conduct a software IT related session? And isn't it going in the like infrastructure thing? No, you're absolutely right. But see, this is what exactly directive does in your programming world. Okay. Let's say you created the project, you created all the logic in your project. Now you think you need some kind of a change. Yeah. If you need a little bit change in your project, instead of changing everything in the project, what if I tell you that there is a way to, alter the course of your application, the way your application behave, that you can actually change. And this is nothing but what directives adds in your project. Okay. Now in Angular, it is component oriented style that we follow. So we create components to construct our application. Now let's imagine a situation where you have created a ton of components and now you think that you need some kind of change in that component. Now when we talk about changing something, see, it's not that easy. Okay, you may be thinking like, okay, let's go in that component and do the necessity change over there, but no, it's not like that. If you do change the code what you have already written, you have to test it, right? You have to spend some time in order to testing that code. Now this is what is bad. If you have ever learned solid design principle, the O in solid stands for open close principle, also defines the same thing, that a software should be open for extension but closed for modification, right? And the same thing actually directives will be giving us the same ability of changing something after the development, right? Now let me share my screen and let's now jump into the technical part. But before moving into that, let me know guys if you're already, if you have understood the thought behind the directive, and if not, just imagine the same image one more time. Okay, our road is constructed and now we want to dig the pipeline. This is not something that we should do in real life and this is not something that we should do in code. Okay. So we will create the road first and without digging we will try to add the pipeline. This is what we are basically going to be doing in this session, and this is how we are going to be basically learning directives. Okay. All right, so let's just get into it now. As I have already created the project here, I'll just open the same project in my Visual Studio Code. Okay, I have created one dummy component there. You can just simply discard that the component does even exist. Okay, let me just close all the file. Okay, we'll start from the very beginning and we'll discover the ability of directives. Okay, so what I have is I have one app component right over here, and there is this app accordion which is another component that I created. To see what exactly there in accordion, there is this paragraph. Let's see. Okay, nothing fancy, it's just simple paragraph. Now as this accordion is just a component, I can use that component in my app component. Okay, and I rendered that component 3 times. Now I'll just try to render it once, and let me just run our project. Okay, the project is already in running, and this is what it produces as an output. Okay, this works. That's very nice. So what we have is a component which is rendered already, and as we discussed earlier also, that we have successfully built our application, we have everything in working. Now we want to change something over there, but without touching the actual code. This is something what we actually want to create. Okay, now let's just do the same thing without implementing the directive. Let's just do this thing by, let's say, with some bad practices. Let's say this accordion component, the paragraph here in the accordion component, okay, the paragraph do not have any styling as of now. You can see clearly here the paragraph is rendered as it is. Okay, if I want to add any background color here, I will go and write some css. This is what something that I can do, right? So let me just go there and try to add some css property over there. But where exactly the code change will be there? The code change will be there in the component, right? I can go in the css and can write, okay, for paragraph let's have background color red. Okay, I did it and it should work, and this works. Okay, the color is red now for the paragraph. But again the same thing, let's go back to the problem. We actually did the same thing. We constructed the road, and now we are trying to dig the pipeline. This is something that we don't want to do. Correct? See, why I'm saying that we are trying to dig the road, because the change I did is inside the component. Okay, so what I want is, I don't want any change in this component. Okay, not here, not anywhere inside this accordion file. Okay, now for that what I should do is, I should have a directive. Okay, now how to create a directive? Well, you can do it in many terms, like you can just simply manually create the file, or you can just hit one command there, which way I'll use, that is ng g for generate and d for directive. Okay, so ng d will create a directive. I'll say background red. Okay, this is a directive that I'm going to be creating. Now you can see here I got two log messages, that is created this directive and directive ts. Now since I'm using angular 17 over here, okay, there is a concept of standalone component and standalone directive. That's why there is no module change. But in case any one of you is using any earlier version of angular, you might be thinking, okay, what's happening over here? So let me just clarify a few things here. Whenever you create a directive now in angular 16 or 17, there is a concept of standalone components. That's why it actually, you don't basically need any module over there. Okay, we can continue with the same approach, but what I'll do, I'll still remove that standalone thing from here, and I'll add that entry of directive inside the module. Okay, so this back red directive, this directive should be in the module. Okay, this is for those who are coming from any older version of angular. Okay, if you are trying to create any directive in the latest Angular version, you actually don't need to have the entry inside a module. But still, I'll go and I'll add that entry in my module. I already have a shared module where I'll add the same directive. Okay. Now since I added that entry in the module, I can easily use that directive anywhere in my application. Okay. Now, what exactly this directive will do? This directive will look for search CSS attribute, and it will add all the code that you mention over here to that element. Okay. I hope you guys are familiar with CSS. So this thing in CSS means any element with this attribute. Okay. The CSS can literally be anything. Okay. We'll be talking about that later in future, but now let's just go with attribute based directive only. Okay. So what I'm supposed to do here, if I want to attach this directive to any element, and as I said, to any element, that means literally any element. That can be any custom component that you created, or that can be even a already existing element like a paragraph or h1. Okay. For simplicity, what I'll do is I'll just get this attribute and go and add to my paragraph. Now, as I add it here, you see nothing actually does really works. We wanted that to be red, right? We were here to see that paragraph red, but nothing is there. Now what's the problem? Okay, the directive is attached, but we haven't actually colored that thing yet. Correct? As I said, guys, directive gives you an ability to change the component's behavior from outside world. Okay, so look, as the paragraph has this directive attached, we should able to change this paragraph's behavior. That can be any kind of behavior, whether it is in terms of look and feel, whether it is in terms of actual behavior. Okay, so let's just go in directive and let's just try to control the paragraph. Okay, we'll start with styling and then we'll see how can we plug our logic also over there. So I'm going into my backread directive. Okay, and to actually get an access to that particular HTML element, you need to add a dependency over here, and that is element ref. Okay, once you add this dependency, you can say now this element is this paragraph. I'll again repeat, directives allows you to control that element from the outside world. Okay, for example, this paragraph which do not have red color, in order to get a red color for the paragraph, I was supposed to do any change over here, but since I have attached the directive, I should able to do the same change from here, from the directive file. Now as I want the same change from here, I should able to have I should have the access to that element, right? So this element is nothing but the paragraph or any other element where the directive has been attached. Okay, now let's try to change the color, and here you just need to know some kind of HTML, how HTML works. Okay, so this dot element is basically kind of a wrapper element. You need a native element access over here to change the style, and native element dot style will give you the HTML element. Okay, dot background color equals, let's take any color, I'll go with yellow this time. which is not something as what directive is saying. Okay, but this is just for example. Let me go back to the code again and let's make it red, because the the directive is named as red. Okay, so for the consumers of the directive, let's not confuse them. Okay, and this is how you can control, this is how you can control anything. As I said, literally anything. Okay, we just change the style here. And let me show you one more very interesting thing over here. Since we have created a directive, as now I can use the directive to any element. Let's say there is an h1 tag over here in the component, which is a normal h1 tag. You know what? Without doing any change to the h1 except for adding attribute, I will able to easily do that change. So this is basically the fundamental thought about directive. Now see, I can use this directive anywhere. Is this interesting? If you find this interesting, I have something more for you. See, as I said, the selector over here can be literally any CSS selector. And again, I'll show the same image. Directives are for changing something after its creation. So you created something, now you actually want to add some extra behavior over there, right? Now you may be agreeing with me on this, that yes, we changed something, okay, without changing that paragraph or h1. But you know what, we actually did at least this, directive attachment here. What if I tell you, like, I can actually skip this part also? Okay, this is not something that I'll do actually in the real project, but you know what, if I have so many paragraphs already created in my project like this. Okay, there are somewhere around 9 paragraphs in my project, and just my client says, like, I want some extra behavior for all my paragraphs. Okay, I'll do again add the style as a change, but that can be any change. So all of the paragraphs can get one common behavior by this directive. All I have to do is just change the selector. So selector is basically a place where you are mentioning where exactly you want this functionality of directive. Directive is kind of a functionality you're trying to attach. Selector is the place where you are mentioning, okay, here I want that functionality. If I just add a p as a selector here, that means now all my paragraphs in the project will have the same nature, like background color red. Now you can say this is something which is interesting. But wait, this thing, you may say that we can do the same thing by using normal CSS also, right? If you create a global CSS file, we can do achieve something very similar. Then how directives are helping us, we are not getting exactly, right? Well, now it's time to get into the next level. What we will do now is the functionality we are adding. See, nothing happens when I try to click on the paragraph. Is there anything which is happening? No, right? But as I said, directive is something. Directive is one functionality or a way to add some functionality after the component creation, right? So there is nothing like click. There is no click which is happening when I click on the paragraph. Okay, nothing is happening. But let's say I want to count how many times the component is being clicked, or I want to log somewhere, when the component is clicked. Let me just first show you if there is any console messages getting when I click. Believe me or not, I'm clicking over there. Okay, 1 2 3, I'm clicking over there, but nothing is happening. Okay, let's now do add this click functionality. But again, remember the fact that we are not even touching the paragraph. If we want to do actually count the total number of clicks on the paragraph, any change shall go here of the counting or anything like that. Okay, but look what I'll do there. Since I have created a directive, so you can say you basically taken out the soul and the control of that element to the directive. Now this is the place from where you can actually control that element. Okay, now as you can control that element, you can plug any functionality there. Okay, and you can also work with events. For that, you just need a host listener and a method that will listen to the event. Okay, how to do that? Let's go with a simple click, and believe me or not, this can work for any other event also. So I'll start with, this is a method handle click. I want this method to get invoked whenever I click on the paragraph. Okay, usually how it would have been, I would have added a click here. But again, our thought is we have already finished up with the project. We don't want any change over here. So see, without doing any change here, we are actually doing the change. That is basically what directives are adding us. How to do that? Well, as I said, we need host listener, which you need to import from Angular core. Okay, and you have to add click. As you do this, what basically you have configured is, you have configured the click event for on this method. Okay, so I'll just do a simple console.log. Okay, this console.log. One more time. See, I already had this component and I just did added the directive. And because of this directive, the paragraph actually, see, every paragraph when I click, these messages are getting logged. Okay, let me just uncheck this setting of grouping similar logs. So you'll actually understand, okay, those number of clicks are actually happening when I click here, when I click here, when I click here. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. So a quick summary about what we have learned so far. We understood in the beginning what exactly directives are in programming. Okay, the directives are a way to add some extra behavior on components or things which are already created. Okay, so you can add some extra functionality like changing the styling or adding some extra event. Okay, as this example was just for click, it can be any event. Okay, like it can be key down event, it can be value change event, it can be literally any event. Okay, so where can you apply these things in your real project? Well, there are so many different scenarios, but mostly it will be very helpful when the code is already created and there are ton of changes in so many different screen you have to do, but they are specifically to some kind of component. Okay, for example, you implemented password text box everywhere in your screen, but you forget to add that hide show, password hide show feature. So something like that also you can do by directive. Okay, like in this example we are handling the click event. Okay, let's say in your project you want to count the number of clicks on a particular type of elements. Okay, you can create a directive, and all you have to do is just attach that directive to that component, and now it will work. See, this is css selector. Okay, it can be, as I said, it can be any kind of css selector. Like it can be attribute selector. If it is attribute selector, the attribute has to be there. Okay, if it is a tag selector, the all the tags, okay, should be there. If you add any class selector like this, okay, it can be applied on all the elements that has the same css class, right? Okay, okay, there is a question in the chat. Can you show icon and password? Okay, yeah, we can definitely add it here. Okay, but we'll be running out of time. So what I'll do, I'll just tell you how can we get that done, and maybe you can do that thing by your own. Okay, so say for example we have an input over here. Okay, and the input is already there. Now you basically want to toggle the type thing. Okay, if the type is text, what happens? This type is text. When the type changes to password, the content that you type here gets hidden. Okay, so if you want to add something like this, okay, like your element is already created over there. Now you just want to add that I like an icon. Okay, you want to toggle that type. Okay, now as you have access to the input itself, you can change that type by your code. Okay, so when you click on the element, you are changing the type. Okay, as you can change it here, like the way you change the style and you change the background color, you can also change the type. Okay, like adding everything, like I icon and all the stuff will be difficult, so I'll just do that thing on the click only. Okay, so whenever we click on the input, we will change the password. Cool. So the same thing I'll do, but now the element I'll target is input. So now all my input in my project, okay, when I click over there, I will get this paragraph click log message. Correct? So if I click on this, see, I'm getting the paragraph click. Make sense? Now whenever I'm clicking it, I just need to change the type. So I have access to the native element, and this way if I just toggle it, it is originally text, so I'll make it password. Let me show you something now. If I land on the screen, okay, as I type. When I click, it is not checking because I already clicked. Okay, whenever I click, I basically need to do it by if else. Okay, if it is already password, then make it text. Basically I have to write some logic over there, like this. Okay, this input will be having type password, and we basically want to change it. Get it? Now the cool part here is this selector. Okay, the selector is input right now, and what we can do is we can actually have any kind of selector. Okay, so ideally in your project you will not be doing this for input, you will be doing it for some kind of class. Okay, so the lab that we saw there, maybe we'll not be doing it for all the inputs, but maybe we'll do it by adding a css selector. Okay, but the same thing. Okay, as you have access to the element, and you can at any moment you can change the behavior over there. Okay, this is for input. If you do change it for h1, it will go for h1. Now h1 do not have that type, so will not be having it there. Now h1 are getting the colors. If we go on p, paragraphs are getting the colors. Okay, this change I'm doing in directive, and the change is automatically happening everywhere in my application. This is what a directive is. Okay, any other real time scenario, if you talk well, sometimes you may need to render the entire element conditionally. Okay, so there is actually a complete different branch of directive which is called structural directive. Okay, now structural directive basically will render the element or hide the complete element from the DOM. Okay, and to create a structural directive you just need to add the container reference and the view reference. Okay, in the component. So basically if you just do create a structural directive, you will able to show them or hide them. The ngif that we use itself is a structural directive. Okay, which renders the element or hides the element. For example, if I go in my accordion where there are these elements are rendered, if there is a span, if I add ngif true, the span will be visible, otherwise it will be hidden. So like right now the span is visible, but if I make it false, it will be invisible. Correct? Now this is working fine. Then why even are we talking about? Well, many times you will need to hide elements based on the user role rights. Okay, and role rights state will be there in some services. Okay, so ideally saying, you can actually definitely add the same state here directly, but that might not be a good idea because all the changes are you're adding over here. Okay, so what you can do instead, imagine something like this: show only when admin. Okay, now such directive doesn't exist, so it will not work directly, but something similar if you can do, imagine that this directive is taking care about the component visibility. Like for example, span is not rendering because this directive is not working and project is not getting compiled, but ideally the span is getting displayed. Imagine something like this: a directive, when you attach, the component will either get displayed or it will get removed from the DOM. Now to create a structural directive, I'll actually do the code change in the same directive. In that case, you need two different kind of dependencies. You need template ref and view container ref. Template ref means the element, you can say, and container means the container of the element. Okay, so you just need to add the template ref and the other is this is of type generic, so I have to mention a type there. And when I say view container, okay, now as you have access to the container and template ref, okay, you can now have any kind of logic which tells Angular whether to load this view or not. Okay, so let's forget about the click and everything. See, this is how simple it is. Okay, in the constructor or anywhere, okay, if I add the condition whether to render this or not, it will get either rendered or it will be just hidden. Okay, so to render the element, you have to call the method create embedded view. Okay, now you can do this in constructor, but what I'll do is I'll basically set this thing from an input only. And again, one more thing, see, this itself is not any input property of span, but when you attach directive, you basically add some extra functionality on that element, right? So you can actually attach it as an input field also. See what I'm doing, I'm trying to pass true or trying to pass false as a value to the input field. Now does this input field exist on the span? Well, definitely not. Okay, but we can actually have it by using directive, because this is a directive and directives are the ways to control your element from outside, right? So here if I expect any input property, it's like having an input property there only. Okay, now this can be any type of value, but as I know I'm going to be passing any boolean always, so I'm actually creating a replica of ngif. I hope you guys are already familiar with ngif. Okay, so I'm actually creating exact replica of ngif, and this is going to be an attribute directive. In case of structural directive, what I'm checking is if the value is true, if the value I'm getting is true, then I'll say view container dot create an embedded view of type template I must use this there. Okay, else the container I'll clear. Okay, so you can imagine the view container is basically where the span is actually getting rendered, and the the content of the whole span is basically what the template is. Okay, so we are actually deciding whether this span should get rendered there or not. Okay, as I'm passing false there, it is not getting rendered, but as I pass true there, it should get rendered. Okay, and this is exact replica of our ngif. The ngif also works like the same, right? Ng, if I do the same thing by using ngif, it is the same. When ngif is true, the component is getting rendered, and when ngif is false, the component is getting not getting rendered. Then what exactly did we achieved? See, as you're adding this structural directive over here, this property is useful but useless at the same time. Okay, because all you can do is you can add some extra dependencies over here from some services. Okay, and from where you are deciding whether the current logged in user is actually um, admin or not, and based on that you can either create an embedded view or you may clear it. Okay, so right now we are checking the value from here, but see, this check can be actually from anywhere. Like for example, it can be, from local storage also. I mean, it is not really good practice to read something from local storage. I'm just giving an example. Like this check can be from any place. Okay, so this is how you can use structural directive to add some extra behavior. But the main idea about directive is you are changing the course of your application behavior, the way your application behave. All the components that you created, they were behaving in one some manner. Okay, now you are trying to add some extra functionality for the span. Okay, and that is again without changing the span itself. One more very important thing is this directive we are attaching to the span, but as I mentioned earlier, it can be added anywhere. Like for example, this is my custom component, there also I can add the same directive, and that is true for all kind of directives. You just need to make sure that the selector you are adding here, right, currently it is attribute selector, which is matching with this attribute css selector. If it was a class, I would have written dot and the class name here, and I would have mentioned class here. Okay, all right, so that was pretty much of it for the directives in Angular. Now as you guys know what exactly directives are for, if you forget, I'll just again share the same image. If anyone asks you what are directive, tell them these are the directives, right? This is the main thought. Okay, you want to do change something without changing the actual component or the item where exactly you are adding the directive. And to attach a directive, you have selectors. Selector can be attribute, selector can be class, selector can be id, selector can be a tag, it can be any css selector. It can be like paragraph, h1, span. Now this means it is getting attached to all the paragraph, h1 and spans. Okay, like this. Okay, I hope you guys understood the basis, the fundamental thought of directives, some technical things that we saw in the session. I hope you guys have understood that as well. So this was pretty much of it for today's session on Angular directives. Thank you guys. Thank you all for joining the session. One important announcement I have to make over here, since you guys all are here, that we are happy to announce our Angular masterclass. This is going to be starting from Jan 2nd. Okay, here you will be learning all the Angular fundamentals, starting from very basic to the advanced level of training you can consider. Okay, this is going to be a complete 1 month of Angular training, where there will be a dedicated WhatsApp group where there will be experts to help you out throughout the your learning. Okay, so just in case anyone is interested, please reach out to us at trainings@justcompile.com. That was it from my side. Keep learning, guys, and hope I will be seeing you in the next session. Thank you. Bye bye. Have a great day ahead.